Hello and welcome to the latest edition of Full Disclosure with me, James O'Brien, joined this week by the author and recipient of the Military Cross, Brian Wood. Brian, I'm glad you're here, and I'm glad you're here quite early in the series because I don't think you'll mind me saying you're not quite as well known yet as some of the previous guests like Tony Blair and Ricky Gervais, but I know your story already, and I think that this opportunity for both of us to get it out to a much wider audience is one that we shouldn't pass up. That said, your book Double Crossed has already made the top two?
Three.
Top three.
Yeah.
Well, I'm top five, so you've beaten me in the Sunday Times top 10 bestseller. And as you know, it's a book that knocked me sideways, as indeed your whole story did. But we're going to obviously conduct this for people who've never heard of you before. So to begin at the beginning, yours was a military family.
Yeah, and a large military family at that. I think we've got still over 100 years unbroken service to this great nation, and I'm proud of that. And but I was never destined to be a soldier. I was half decent at football when I was younger, growing up. I was at Chelsea, actually with John Terry, and he clearly progressed. There's a few reasons why. My dad was still serving. He was still committed to his career, and training in Cobham on a Tuesday and Thursday night was difficult to get to because Dad was working and the M25 was, it's brutal at the best of times. So trying to get over there for the correct training time was difficult. I was kind of being late and it wasn't good for us. And we come to an agreement that Chelsea wasn't to be just because of logistics.
Life getting in the way. How good were you?
I travelled the world playing football, James, if I'm honest, with the military as well. Brazil, Mauritius, South Africa, to name but a few countries. So
that's air miles.
Yeah.
How good were you?
That was all right. I think it's
You're so modest. We're going to discover this later in the interview.
I went to Reading and they released me at 16 and kind of 5 months old, saying that I didn't fill out, I didn't produce, physically as much they wanted me to. So I was released on that basis, and I was just around the dinner table. My dad and my brother's also serve and still continue to serve at the moment. And I just felt out of place, listening to these stories, and they had such a big connection and a powerful connection. I was just like, I'm not even involved in this conversation. So one day I just took myself to the careers office and said, look, I want to make a small difference to this nation and I want to go on this journey. And that's kind of started.
Did you tell your dad that you were going?
No. But I got back and I told my dad that I need parental consent, and he said, you better go and tell your mum. And I was like, Dad, can you tell mum? And he was like,
Mum knows what it's like to be stuck at home wondering what's happening on the other side of the world.
Absolutely. And she's already lost a son to the military already, my older brother, and she didn't want to lose me to this institution. But I had my heart set on it, and I was going to go regardless. So I went into the kitchen and Mum was cooking, and she knew it was coming. She knows. She knew me better than anyone. She was like, where have you been? And I said, I've been to the recruitment office. And she said, you're not going, are you? I said, I'm going. And she was like, I'm going to lose you both now. And I was like, yeah. And it kind of was that. It's once you join and go into that institution, it's a love affair and you're away and you become engrossed in this band of brothers and this external family, which has got the same values, in my opinion, as what my household had. So yeah, that's my start of my kind of journey.
So if the cards had fallen differently, you'd have Champions League medals at home instead of a military cross.
I don't know about that. Clearly, I wasn't good enough.
Has John Terry ever borrowed your uniform?
I know, but his medal cabinet's a bit bigger than my medal cabinet. So.
And was it? You say it was like a love affair, and I understand you very quickly came to feel about your comrades, as you say, as you would about a family. But was it love at first sight? Did you never look back, or were there moments in the early weeks and months of training where you thought, you were used to the physical exertion, obviously, but were there moments where you thought you might have made a mistake or you might have taken the wrong path?
No, I think my dad shaped me very well. He gave me an understanding of what I was going to go into. I had that knowledge from my dad and my brother. So I kind of knew it was going to be hard. It was going to be the case of getting my head down. And in the back of my mind, I always knew the purpose. I wanted to make a difference to my country, and I was very patriotic. I wanted to do the right thing, and it was to join. And I never looked back. And since I walked through them gates, the people who are
where
also...
Where were the gates, just for people?
Basenborn.
Okay.
That was where I'd done my first phase, and then my second phase was Catterick. That's specific training to be a frontline soldier in Catterick. But yeah, they just kind of get hold of you. Everyone's in the same boat, so you just all of a sudden straight away you're enclosed and you have to gel together. You have to carry out these tasks.
Crucial to what follows, isn't it? This
Yeah,
sense of
absolutely.
connection, and also this sense of being cocooned, it being it's almost a separate universe from
Yeah,
Civvy
it
Street.
is. I call it, like, it is such an institution. And I'm in the real world. So I was in this bubble for such a long time, and it was so structured and so disciplined, and it was run by powerful values.
Mm.
And you get educated on these values, you get taught them, and they're dissected. So you know what is right, what is wrong, and doing the right thing.
And that of course is why for many servicemen and women it's a real struggle when they leave, because that framework is almost telling them where they need to be and what they need to be doing every minute of every day, and suddenly there's nothing.
And it is like that. It's called detail. So you go and read exactly what you have to do the following day, what time you got to reveille, we call it,
Really?
wake up,
Crikey.
the block jobs, what they've got to carry out, your breakfast time, and then what lessons your first lesson is in the morning, and what dress you have to be in, as in what equipment that you're needed to kind of turn up at that first lesson.
Gosh.
So it's so clear direction, and it's kind of guiding you through your days. And then all of a sudden to come out into the real world, you haven't got that. And it's difficult because on paper, if you haven't got the right qualifications or the right ticks in the boxes on a CV, it's a shame, because I think employers may miss a trick. Get these people in front of you and ask them about leadership, ask them about their values, ask them about their experiences, and they can, and have proven to be very, very good.
It's like the opposite of a tick box culture, isn't it? Is that you need to communicate the story behind this individual rather than just a list of achievements or attributes or qualifications.
Yeah.
And you can't do that except in person. When you talked about getting to Catterick to be a frontline soldier, when do you decide which path within the army you're going to take? How did you make that decision?
From the start. I mean, yeah, my dad was a frontline soldier. My brother was a frontline soldier. And
just to not be about the bush, that means that when there is action, you will be at the front of the queue.
Yeah, ground holding on your kind of on your feet with your kit.
Your poor mum.
I know. And it was later on in life. Dad is full head of grey, and he would always say, "This is kind of what you did to me."
Yeah.
And mum, because when I was in country in the UK, my brother was in Afghan or Iraq. When I was in Afghan and Iraq, my brother was in the UK. So we were kind of, they always had a son in foreign fields, which is hard for any parent. It really is. So
where does that come from, Brian? Do you think that desire? Because there's a million different things you can do in the army. You're still making a difference. You're still serving your country. But I think for those of us who could never imagine doing what you've done with your life, it's that knowledge of the risk that you're taking that's very hard to understand.
Yeah, I think I wanted to understand what was going on within these countries and how we can rebuild, how we can stabilize, and how we can guide and advise and offer the younger generation something. And I wouldn't have got to do that behind a desk or back in Camp Bastion or even in Sharbelog base, when that's the main operating bases before going forward. So I wanted to understand, what it was like speaking to the village elders or the locals and finding out about their gripes and what they need and what they want. And obviously the tempo was fierce because we were war fighting in my first tour of Iraq. It was just, I've never experienced.
What year was that?
2004.
Right.
Was when my
and how
first
old were you
tour.
then?
23.
Good grief. Yes.
But I wanted to understand it from a young age. I'm very a forward thinker, and I'm proactive in what I want to do, and having the kind of listening to the chatter around the table, I just wanted to do what my granddad had done. I wanted to do what my brother was doing. I wanted to do what my father had done. So it was a big thing for me to actually be a ground holding soldier and actually be on the tip of the spear.
Tell me about that first tour, that first time actually doing it for real rather than, but I don't want to say pretending, but training. There is a degree of pretense involved.
It was unforgettable, really. The tempo when we got into country Iraq, we understood it was a very violent and kinetic, which is engagement with militia fighters, because it was an uprising. We have this intelligence which comes down daily. So when we're actually in the UK prepping to go out, we're getting this feed all the time. We know what's happening daily. and it wasn't looking good. And the peace talks had broken down. Muqtada al-Sadr, who was the main militia leader at that time, was fully in power, and he just basically went around all the local shuras and the meetings and stipulated that all coalition forces are going to get hit, and they're going to get hit hard, and they're going to really fight for their ground. And you know, when you're a young commander, you're always sort of questioning yourself. Well, not always, but you do question yourself on what am I going to be like under pressure in a contact situation where you're fighting for your life, and are you going to fight or flight? Because until you're tested, you just don't know that. You know, soldiers react differently, and I've seen it front end on both people fighting and flighting. So I wanted to kind of feel that. I wanted to see what I would be like.
You wanted to know yourself.
I wanted to know myself, yeah, what I was going to be like as a commander. And I like to think I held my own. And
can you remember the first time you were under fire?
Yeah, got out of the vehicle and then got straight back in, because it was such a big, violent, powerful contact from the rooftops. You got out of the vehicle disorientated. It was just like fireworks in daylight everywhere because of the tracers, and it was just, you couldn't get a fix. And then the commander would be like, get back in the vehicle because it's an unarmored vehicle, and it wasn't the right for us to be out in that such a vulnerable space. And that was like experiencing all sorts of emotions, fear. Everyone's got their own fear analogy and their fear bubble, but the bottom line is it is contagious. When I was a young leader at 23, I could still potentially leak my fear onto them.
Yes,
and I didn't want to do that. I wanted to kind of lead by example and inspire to do the right thing. So that was something I was experiencing for the first time as well. And that's that talk. And from day one,
just remind us what you are in charge of when you say your team and your vehicle. What is the
5 other dismounts, so 5 other grown men, 18, 19 years old, and
you're in a heavily armoured vehicle,
yeah,
albeit, as we'll discover, not invulnerable, but there's not a lot of visibility, obviously. There's not.
It's dark, it's boiling hot. It's like 60 to 65 degrees, and that's not an exaggeration. It's 45 to 50 out in Iraq at that point. Anyway, outside of the vehicle, inside this armoured vehicle with no aircon, it's an oven. And there's cases where soldiers were going down with heat exhaustion, so we're having to kind of put drips in each other to keep us sustained, because it was out in the city fighting for a long period of time. And when you're exhausted, when you can't hydrate yourself quick enough, and you're drinking boiling hot water as well because of the heat, it was hard work. But listen, we chose to do that.
And you're thinking that at the time, are you? The first time you come under fire, the first time you open fire in proper combat, there's never any voice in your head saying, well, what am I doing here? It just felt, I sense, that you were almost meant to do this with your history and your
I think
personality.
So. Yeah, and I also understood mission command. I knew, the Iraq there's so much controversial around it.
Of course.
But we got to kind of remain impartial. We're there to do a job. We're sent to these theatres of operations, and we're never the aggressors. And we've got mission command and mission specific tasks that we have to go and carry out. And we've got to believe in that. We've got to heavily believe in that, because if you don't, or you're questioning it, that's when things will start to go wrong. And it's very important that as a soldier, there's an imbalance or there's a balance, and you've just got to then believe in what we're there for and try and work hard to stabilise or whatever the mission specific task is when we're out there. But 2004, on the 14th of May, at 14:30 hours, I was involved in something that would change my life forever. And that was the infamous Battle of Danny Boy.
Yes.
And
we remember that morning?
Yeah. I mean, we were just on a normal routine patrol, and it was just a vehicle checkpoint that we were on. And how we would conduct that, every third or fourth car would pull over, do a courtesy search, be courteous and kind to the occupancy of the vehicle.
Because the massive majority of people there are civilian, and the insurgents look like civilians.
Yeah.
So that's why you're checking.
100%. And we've got biometric systems, and it's checking for trafficking of weapons and drugs and IED bomb making kit, just to make sure that it's not flowing easily through different cities up to Baghdad, because we were in the middle of Basra and Baghdad. We were in El Amara, which was like a smaller Fallujah at that time, because that's how violent it was. And I just remember getting a call on my radio saying, "Stop what you're doing now, get into the vehicle. There's been an incident." So you get that kind of emotion, then the adrenaline starts to kick in.
But again, not out of the ordinary for you. Something that has happened on previous
Something's
occasions.
happened there. Absolutely. I was blown up 2 weeks prior to this. But I was, clapped what I was doing.
But when you saw it, you forget perhaps that most people don't hear phrases like "I was blown up 2 weeks prior to this," and then move on to the next bit. What exactly does that mean?
Johnson Bahari actually won the Victoria Cross for the incident that I was involved in. And we were doing a resupply to one of our forward operating bases called Simic House. And on the way to do this resupply, we were hit with 284 Soviet Union missiles from a rooftop, but it comes straight for our armour and caused all sorts of carnage within the back of this vehicle and set it alight. My gunner was burning and screaming. Couldn't see because of the smoke, and it was burning our respirators because of the plastic and the rubber. So it was like really, I was more scared in the back of that vehicle than I was going into that trench and Danny Boy, because I wasn't in control of the situation.
Right.
I was filling up, my feet were wet, and I didn't know if it was blood, but I looked down and the diesel tank had been hit. So I started to fill the vehicle up in the back with diesel. So I was thinking, we're going to now burn to death. And the soldier opposite me had been hit with shrapnel across his top nose, and that was kind of dangling down near his sort of bottom of his chin, and just was in battle shock. And the other soldier wanted to get out of the vehicle and have a fight with these insurgents, and I was trying to calm everything down. But there was one sort of crazy situation where you have this weird thought process when you're in these situations, and one was, how do I stop coughing like this and choking? And all of a sudden, Backdraft came into my head, which is a film made years ago.
I remember.
And what they did was, one of the situations was to try and filter the smoke, was to pour water on these rags and put it on your face. And I never even knew if it was going to work, but I just remembered it. Crazy as it was, I was like, Backdraft, right? This is the situation. Poured water on it and then put it around the guy's face to try and filter out the black toxic smoke. But I think it worked. So I was like, and then we managed to get to a safe haven, what Johnson Bahari did that day. And
I mean, he was essentially driving with...
Yeah, he was we were lead vehicle, and he managed to, there was barricades up all around the city. They knew what we were doing, and they just hit us, but they hit us really hard and caused all sorts of damage and casualties as well. So yeah, that was 2 weeks prior.
So who's in the vehicle 2 weeks later then? Because presumably a few of the people that you were with that day are shipped out almost immediately.
So that day, me going and being in, I never should have been in Johnson Bahari's vehicle.
Right.
But there's a prior to this day, another commander was hit and was a casualty and got flown back to Shaiba Log Bay to be treated. So I was then moved that day to this vehicle. So it was unlucky. Yeah, I mean, I never knew that was going to happen. But yeah, I was never in Johnson's Bahari vehicle until that morning, and I went into the vehicle and then we got hit, and then I actually got flown back for 2 weeks in hospital because the blast, I had so much fragmentation through my face, and my irises were really damaged, and I did panic thinking I was going blind. And then I got put on a drip myself, and then I got flown back to Shaiba Log Base, which is in Basra, the big massive medical center where they do some incredible work, and had scans, multiple scans, and I had shrapnel into the bone on this arm as well from a tail fin. But when I seen it, I just thought it was a superficial kind of thing. So I tried to pull it and just take it out. But as I've got it, it's like right in my bone, and I've like moved my whole arm. I thought, oh, that's quite deep. So I was like, right, what do we do now? And then I went back and they took it out on surgery. My face was kind of looked like it was pebble dashed with the shrapnel and stuff, and my eyes were damaged. So it was my eyes which were causing me the issue why I couldn't go back sooner than what I did, because I wanted to go back. I was
that's a bit people struggle with, presumably. I mean, people
I've got responsibility.
That's how you feel.
Yeah,
you have to be. If you're
100%.
not there, something worse might happen than what would happen if you were there.
Yeah, you've got this responsibility even though I was 23 and I was a real junior commander, I still had responsibility. This brotherhood. and like sisterhood. You can't explain it. It's so ingrained in you that 100% you'll take a bullet,
Yes,
left
clearly.
or right.
And I mean, you feel this very, very keenly.
Yeah.
And your normal modesty aside, is that normal? Do all of your comrades feel this way? Or do you think you feel it a little bit more deeply than is average?
So. I don't think so, because I've seen some incredible bravery acts myself. I've seen courage, selfless commitment, and just true grit.
Yes.
I've witnessed it from other people, and it's just, that's how you are meant to operate. You are a family. You are brothers and sisters, and you've got to, work that way.
So was it the first day back out then after you got back from hospital?
Pretty much, yeah. Pretty much. And
message comes in.
Message comes in that we have to go and extract. The 2 casualties had been hit from a Scottish regiment,
right?
Argyll and Southern Highlanders. One had a grenade wound to the inner leg, and one had a tricep gunshot wound to the tricep, but one was bleeding out. So because we were closest to these soldiers, British soldiers, we were asked to go there and pick them up and immediate first aid and ship them back, because we were armoured as well. We were in these armoured vehicles. And on the way down there, James, I tell you what, I've been in some scary situations, but this was overwhelming. The suppression on our vehicle, we came to a grinding halt, and it was shaking. 33 tons worth of armoured vehicle, it was moving. And I'd been country for a while, like I said, at this point, and I knew what an engagement was like. I knew it was normally from rooftops, or it was a sporadic engagement, in and out, gone. You can't see them. It's so difficult finding urban areas. This was different. It was sustained. It was the noise. The gunner and the commander who were up in the turret were disorientated a little bit. They were communicating to it. They were trying to find where this location was and then fix it and then start to return fire, which they did after kind of maybe 30 to 40 seconds. And in the back, with all this going on, I was just like, this is different to what we've been dealing with before. This is sustained. And why is it sustained?
Right.
I never knew. And at this stage, it's so important that you kind of keep quiet, let the commander and the gunner start to deal with what they have to. They're under enough pressure, and the radio is going mad because people want to know what's going on. They want to know a situation report. And so for me to get involved, it would just too much radio feed. Yes. And then it kind of calmed down slightly. And then I asked Stick, the commander, what's happening? And he said to me, there's a stronghold, 10 to 15 entrenched type positions. And I was like, that's completely different what we've been fighting before. Okay, what does that mean? They're staying and fighting. They have got the traditional Middle Eastern weaponry, AK-47s, Dushkas, which are like 12.5, so it's a big caliber RPGs. And I knew that we had 2 vehicles. There was only 3 of us in the back at this point. So I was like, okay, we're kind of outnumbered and outgunned to a degree. But let's just see what happens. And then they started to engage again. And then, the order came in. Woody, prepare you and your men to get out of this armoured vehicle and go and launch a counter-attack on that stronghold. And I I asked him again to repeat what he just told me, because it kind of doesn't really happen.
And because the odds were
and the odds are stacked against us. And I asked him, and he was like, listen, prepare you and your men to leave this vehicle. And I was like, then you kind of experience all sorts of adrenaline, and it was like an out-of-body experience.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So I was asking him, look, is there any way I can get out at least to give me a chance to have a look where the stronghold is, to then try and tactically figure out what I'm going to do.
So could it have been anywhere in a 360?
I didn't have a clue where it was. I was in the back of this armoured vehicle. There's only a small glass window, which is condensation and grit.
Yeah.
You can't see nothing out of it.
Yeah.
So I was like, and it's like dark in there, really dark.
So your foot could have barely hit the ground.
Yeah. And then the brightness as well. So when that door opens, it's so bright and you are overly disorientated. So I said to him, look, is there any way we can give me a chance? He said, yes. Once the door opens to your 10 o'clock, there's a dried out irrigation ditch. We will give you fire support. We will suppress the trench and you get out and get in there. Then you can start your assessment. So I said to the boys, because they can't hear on their headset. They are relying on me to verbally speak to them. So I said, look, this is what's going to happen. And they kind of looked at me like with the emoji eyes that I was like, when I was told to get out, I was like, what is going on? Okay, fully switched on now. This is what's going to go. This is what we're going to do. And they were overly courageous and brave men. A Fijian lad I had with me and Rushforth. And I said, look, this is what we're going to do. We're going to get out. We're going to head towards this 10 o'clock. There's a dried out ditch. We're going to get in there. We'll do an assessment and then we'll have another chat from there. We're going to go. And they're like, we're going to go with you. But you never know until it actually happens if they're going to go.
Oh, cool.
I had a good understanding that they were going to come with us. So yeah, the door opened and it's on a hydraulic system. So when it's open, it opens pretty quick. It's like an arm. It just whips it out. And I said, yeah, I'm good to go. We're good to go. And then the vehicle then just went wild and blasted this stronghold. And the door opened and I just remember just committing. And once you commit, you've got to go then. You're going no matter what. And I don't think it's a Chad saying, but I would have went and died trying because that I did believe in what he told me. We need the boots on the ground because the vehicle wasn't causing the effect that it needed to because they were in these zigzag positions. And he said that to me. And I believed that. And I even do now to this day.
Yes.
And I got out and I was running towards this dried out ditch, went down on my belly. Heart was smashing against my body armor plate with adrenaline. I looked to my left-hand side and seen the other boys come in. And at this point, when he had 3. So I was like trying to sort of get a grip of myself and take a cigar moment, pause 2, 3, reassess, breathe, and then let's go to the next phase, which I did. And I snuggled up, had a look. And initially, I just didn't think we had a chance because I've seen how much movement. The noise was deafening. It's so much noise. There's confusion. There's all sorts of experiences within the human body. And I was hyped up, ready to go in and said to the boys, this is it. We're going to go forward and this is how I feel that it should work. And when I was talking to them, we had another 2 soldiers randomly turn up from behind us. A vehicle turned up and these boys come running into our position. And we decided we're going to move as a 3 and a 2. I was going to move first with the 3 of us, me plus 2 others, and then we're going to kind of bound forward and just go down the middle, hard, fast and aggressive. So
and you're not thinking like this, but in retrospect, probably expecting that might be the last thing you ever do.
Yeah, well, we did just wished each other good luck when we left and all the best. And if we get casualties, we'll come back after that position's clear, which I was expecting to get casualties. And we went over the top. And when I say over the top, it was like the Second World War type stuff. And when I've had time to kind of think about it, I actually think, what my granddad would have thought. Because he was in Dunkirk and actually he sadly passed in Edinburgh Castle. And his values were like mine. His selfless acts when he was in the water, he got everyone else on the boats and he remained in the water because that's who he was. And that's what I would have done. And I'm not just saying it, that's how I lead like that. And everyone else is on first and then you're the last one to go on because you're the leader and you're the commander. And he was exposed through pneumonia, got back, and unfortunately he was too far gone. And he passed once he got back up to Edinburgh Castle. But I wonder what he would have thought and if he would have done the same thing, and I'm sure he would have. And yeah, like we went over the top, made the first bound, and I mean, if I was to say this, there was spraying and sand puffing up around my feet, then I wouldn't be lying. That's how it was. And we just kind of progressed, moved forward, never heard the call man down, continued to bound forward, still no man down call. And then I started to kind of believe now we could achieve, which a lot of people thought was unachievable. Went forward, 50 metres away, 30 metres away. And then I start to see militia fighters leaving this position now. So all of a sudden, to have not a lot of odds, to have the odds in our favour now, you feel that. And I can see them leaving. So we've now got a foothold on this ground. We are now the aggressors.
Yeah.
And it was a weird feeling. It was like, we can actually do this now. Keep going, keep working hard. And just before we get about to go in and kind of clear the militia fighters and close with and destroy them, all of a sudden they threw their weapon systems down. They threw their weapons down and surrendered. And it's a hard thing to get right when you are experiencing all this kind of adrenaline. I've got a split second to get it right. You're fighting for your life to all of a sudden you have to now go into switch fire, cease fire, and now go into the arrest mode. And it's difficult. It really is. But we did it. There was a lot of confusion. I've never done this before, James.
It's worth noting that without being controversial in any way or provocative, the values that you describe are not necessarily shared by the people you're fighting against. When it comes to moments like that, of attempting to surrender and things like that. And you, I know, are of the view that it makes it all the more important that you observe these values and that you subscribe to these standards.
I think it's overly important. And do you know what? As an organisation, sometimes we get it wrong.
Yes.
And I'm the first to say, we do get it wrong sometimes, but every other organisation sometimes gets things wrong. And when you're under so much pressure, I can understand sometimes why we get it wrong, and it's not excusable. We have to adhere to rules of engagement. We have to adhere to, human life and lawfare. We have to adhere to that. And we're educated daily on it, but sometimes it can go wrong.
Of course.
But I've been in a situation where I kind of understand sometimes why you get it wrong, because you're fighting for your life, and all of a sudden it has to stop. To switch off is really, it's hard, but we did that. Like I said, it was a lot of confusion.
Just for the record, you did everything right that day. This is kind of going to become quite a relevant observation in a couple of minutes.
We did it right, and I was really proud of kind of how we acted, and there was a lot of confusion because there was a lot of now bodies on the around this trench area that had been hit with the vehicle, that had been hit with us and not with our ammunition. They had been killed in fighting, and I'm now trying to get my head around this, and I'm 23 at this point, trying to deal with all of this, trauma. And we get there, we segregate the POWs who are now prisoner of war to the bodies on this trench position, and the vehicle starts to engage. I think it was a vehicle, or the fighters who withdrew out of this position have started to fire again. So now I'm in this position with the POWs, prisoner of war. There's weaponry everywhere. I'm scared that they're going to pick up a weapon and spray us. So I'm trying to sort all this out. There was loads of confusion, but we did it, and we did it to the best of our ability with nothing breached, our values intact and in good order. And then my sergeant major turned out of nowhere, just turned up onto this position, and the sergeant major is like, he's a very respected man. He's been there, seen it, done it, got the t-shirt, and he's an incredible leader. And he asked me an integrity question, actually, and that was, is the battlefield clear? And do you know what I wanted to say it was? I really did. I was desperate to kind of say it was, actually. But because of my values and my integrity, I was like, it's not clear. He's like, what do you mean? I said, when I was approaching this stronghold, I seen them leave, seen fighters leave, and he's like, okay, put a fresh magazine on. We're going to go on a clearance patrol. Now
this, I've just realised that I want people to read your book. I don't want the entire story to be laid out in the course of this interview, because what follows now is among the most powerful and compelling passages of the whole book. So we're going to move forward, if we may, to why the book is called Double Crossed. So what you've described is I know you're not comfortable with these things, but acts of enormous heroism and bravery, but also you keep using the word integrity, and it was intact. It wasn't just intact that day. It was clear and present. So much so you received the Military Cross. You came home a hero, it's fair to say. Why is your book called Double Crossed? What is this horrible thing that is just down the road from where we are now?
Because in 2009, there was a letter posted through my letterbox because I was away on a course in the UK. I was serving in Germany at the time, and my wife opened it, and it was a letter stating that there's going to be a public inquiry regarding Danny Boy, the Battle of Danny Boy, and the allegations that I was up against, me and my fellow soldiers and my regiment, was murder, mutilation, and mistreatment. And
Did Lucy phone you and tell you?
yeah, she did. I was on the bottom field to earn my Green Beret as a commando, and had about 20 missed calls. Phoned, I knew there was a problem.
Yeah,
I think it was the kids. I thought it was
Of
kids.
course
Yeah,
you would, like any parent.
and yeah, she just said, "I can't believe this. There's a letter," and that's what it stipulated. And I was in disbelief, but then I phoned my regiment and said, "Look, is this true?" And they said, "Yes." And I was like, "Well, why didn't anyone come down to see me?"
Yeah.
That's leadership, not a letter through my door. I mean, what's going on? Oh, but you're away on a course, and yeah, that was poor leadership. And
it's not ideal for your wife either, is it? For her
well,
to
she doesn't
actually
know what's
tear
going on.
open the envelope and see this.
Absolutely, and that was the kind of the spark and the fire which would slowly burn with all these allegations, and then all of a sudden, there's a panorama on whose orders is getting done. There's now my name in the papers, on the news, because they knew, everyone knew I was a commander during the Battle of Danny Boy. So I've just had now all this justification daily on people asking me what I did. You know, if they're reading, is it true? Was there innocent civilians killed? And, you know, why was it being put into the public? So I was like always justifying myself. And it was just a nightmare.
And we now know that essentially British lawyers had been almost like people ringing up and saying, "Have you been in a car accident?"
Yeah.
Trying to just sign up people to bring these complaints and these grievances with very little scrutiny, very little effort to establish the good faith or the credit. Well, obviously, as things turned out, it's almost unbelievable when you read the background to what happened. It's breathtaking in its crassness, but for you, it's a battering, an utter mental and moral battering.
It did punish me mentally, if I'm honest, and that's a kind of a whole, that's a whole different podcast in itself.
And we'll do it one day, I promise you.
That was a real mindset in the face of adversity, and trying to show resilience through all of this, which was going on. But
I mean, it was so ridiculous that presumably there must have been moments where you just thought, "Oh, this will just fall apart and go away."
Yeah.
And it didn't.
I was in the dock. And then the chairman of the inquiry, Sir Thane Thorbes, said, "Good morning, Colour Sergeant Wood. I'm the chairman of the inquiry." And for 3.5 hours, I was stripped of everything. Every value that I stood for, everything that I believed in was peeled away. And I was just left empty at the end of it, gutted, heartbroken. And I just couldn't even believe that I was in the dock. And Phil Shiner, and
that's the lawyer.
The lawyer, the organisation, which really, do you know what? I'd love to meet him, bizarrely, for a beer, and I would love to understand his motive,
because he has been entirely discredited.
Yeah,
so
12 accounts.
You would like to say why?
Yeah, I wanted. He was gold standard at one point, and he was very good. And I know that he really was outstanding during the Bar Mitzvah trial, which British soldiers made mistakes, and they paid the price. They were found guilty, and they should have, right? So this was never another Bar Mitzvah trial. There was zero evidence to even align it with that. But because he was gold standard, because he was a celebrity in his own right with the whole lawyer case, that the MOD fed him money, but not a few thousand. It was millions. And it took 10 years to actually get to the point where it was wholly without foundation.
So just go back. What happened at the end of those 3.5 hours in the dock?
got out, went into the holding room. My solicitors said, well done. You represented yourself. Incredible. This is regarding the situations. And as I was on the way out of the building, Tatawaka, the soldier who was the Fijian on the ground with me, was coming in, and I just kind of done a courtesy nod, because I knew that what he was going to experience wasn't nice.
No.
It was, it's hard to explain. It was just one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. And what frustrated me as well, James, was there was no one in the courtroom. There was no one in the inquiry room that put everything into context. So what I was trying to do is answer these questions that I was getting grilled, and really opening up, like my citation was up on the TV screens, and it wasn't to praise me. It was to go through every single bit of detail, what they thought I did wrong, and it was for me trying to answer them, but put it into content. What I wished for was someone was in that room, a senior officer or a senior regimental sergeant major, to say, actually, let's just put this into context. These were ambushed by a heavily armed insurgency group. The battlefield noise, the confusion, the trauma, and everything that we were experiencing, how can you even discredit that action? But I was kind of having to do it myself. And I just felt under so much pressure that I maybe wasn't answering how I should have answered, because I was trying to bring the battlefield into the courtroom and defend myself and my soldiers' actions because of that battle. It was just, I've never done that before. I've never been in the courtroom like that before. So it's like, it was just, that was a traumatic experience.
I can tell. It's almost talking to you as if that runs deeper now than some of the actual engagements. Some of the, I suppose you were trained to deal with.
What I was going to say, I had no training. I was like fighting a secondary battle on home soil, but going in blind, never had any training or educated.
With this dual knowledge of your own innocence and the fear that you might not be able to prove it.
Definitely. One of the questions were, are they going to take my military cross away from me? I don't speak about that very often now because of all it's been casted a shadow upon, and it's difficult for me to talk about that. It's even, do you know what? It's in a pouch in my sock drawer at home. It'll come out one day. I mean, I wear it on remembrance. And if I go to like a charity for SAFA or for a soldier's charity, and that is the dress code, I'll wear it then, but then it'll go back in the pouch and back in the drawer. It was for something which was one of the proudest, other than my kids being born and my wedding day. It was the proudest day of my life, and had my mum and dad there, and my wife, going through the gates of Buckingham Palace was just an incredible feeling.
And you still feel it's a bit tarnished by what happened after, but even though you've been utterly exonerated, spoiler alert, even though there is no shadow, Brian, anymore.
I know, I've lived through it though, James, and there is no shadow anymore. There was no shadow in the first place, but people made there a big shadow, and they made me question myself as well. They made me question my leadership because I wasn't educated in the room. I wasn't educated to revisit statements after statements after statements. I actually did think, could I have done better? Okay. Could I have commanded better? Could I have made more different decision making? Should I give that, insurgent some water, which is a lesson learned for me. I didn't. We had half a bottle left, and I left it for us, for British troops to drink. But in the courtroom, that was not the right thing to do. That was not human rights. I should have given the prisoner of war some of the water. And you go over this, and you revisit it, and it was just a hard decade. I
know this is, I mean, a big chunk of your life spent under suspicion, answering questions.
Yeah.
And I'm glad we've left gaps in the story, because I really can't recommend Double Crossed highly enough. And we're moving near the end of our time together today. When did you feel the cloud? I mean, for you, when did you think it's over?
when my former commanding officer sent me a text message saying the summary's out, and then I went on there and I watched it. I watched him, Sir Thane Thorbes, deliver this summary, and that was a mixture of relief and different emotions, anger
that you've been brought to this.
Yeah. And then I phoned Lucy up and said, we don't need to triple lock our doors as much now, maybe. Because that's how paranoid it made me.
Yeah.
I was thinking it's an eye for an eye. People have thought I've done this unlawful stuff. My son is at school, and the school playground yard gossip was his dad was a murderer of innocent civilians. How do you even deal with that? I didn't know how to deal with it. And so all of this kind of come flooding up to the surface. And amongst this story, I was brave enough to go and seek some support as well, some counselling. So I just needed to continue with that support and be brave enough to go and seek that support, which I did, and it definitely did help me. So yeah, I mean, once it was all done and the announcement was made, and sometimes I just do think even now how that even took 10 years, and it's all good now. And
when you started writing it down,
it's hard because it's real emotion stuff. It's real. There was a lot of trauma involved. I don't want to give too much of the book away, clearly, but there's other incidents that I speak about, set piece battles that I was involved with, which was there was some big incidences which we haven't got time to speak about, but that all came flooding back. So I was trying to sort of.
But it's a therapeutic book as well.
Yeah, I mean, it was as well. Writing it, it definitely shut a lot of chapters, but there was a few sneaky chapters which ignited a few.
I can see that.
Symptoms, and
and it's enjoyed a great success, which is a valid...
Oh no, who would have thought? I mean, you launched your book on...
Oh, don't you dare bring my book into this conversation.
Absolutely. It was only about a month and a half before mine. So seeing yours going onto the bestsellers list, it kind of, and being published from the same publishers, it was like, come on, we can really do this. And then when it went in, you've been very loyal to me. You really have. And I do appreciate that. And you've been very kind to me, and you give me a massive chuck up when you found out it went onto the bestsellers list, and you give me opportunities like this where I'm just an ordinary guy, but to come on.
You're not an ordinary guy, but we're not going to have that argument again. You're an important guy with an important story, and we've touched on it. We've examined some of the major themes of it, and we have hopefully done enough to make everybody who's listened to this rush out and buy Double Cross to find out all the rest of it. Can we talk about the other thing? Can we mention the
what I can say is, has the rights to the book gone?
Yeah,
they have.
Okay, so who's going to play Brian Wood? This is the killer question to close our full disclosure podcast.
You.
Brian Wood, thank you, mate. What a pleasure.
Ledge, thanks so much.